The galaxy had seen wars before, countless ones that burned across centuries and left stars dimmed by the smoke of their own pride. But it had never known silence like this, a silence that came not from peace but from something far worse, anticipation. For weeks the alien fleets had surrounded the Sol system, their ships shining like cold knives against the dark, every empire united in arrogance, every admiral confident that humanity was finished at last. They had mocked Earth's silence, called it cowardice, believing the humans too broken to fight back after the Council's last ultimatum. But then came the transmission, short, calm, and chilling, spoken by a single human admiral whose name none of them knew but whose tone would echo through every species' nightmares for centuries. He leaned forward into the screen, his expression unreadable, and said 5 simple words, "Now, I'm actually getting annoyed." For a few seconds, no one reacted, no one breathed. The words seemed almost funny, a human joke lost in translation. Then something strange happened. The older commanders on the alien bridge ships turned pale. Some dropped their instruments. One even stood up and ordered an immediate retreat. The younger officers were confused, asking why, but the elders didn't answer. They simply stared at the stars beyond the screens, whispering words like Titan, Draken, and the silence. In less than 10 minutes, half the armadas began pulling back without command authorization. The Council tried to issue orders, but their comms went wild, distorted, jammed, fading into static. Across the galaxy, thousands of stations lost contact with their fleets. Panic spread faster than light. The younger races didn't understand, but the old ones remembered. They remembered the last time a human had said those words. It was 2 centuries ago, during the siege of Draken 9, when the allied fleets of 10 empires had besieged a single human colony for 1 whole year. They starved it, bombarded it, broke its atmosphere, and when humanity refused to surrender, they laughed. Then, a voice had come across the radio, tired and almost bored. "Now," it said, "I'm actually getting annoyed." The next day, Draken 9 went silent, not the colony, but the entire system. 10 empires vanished with it. No one ever found debris, no one found survivors, not even wreckage. Just radiation, faint and endless, drifting where suns used to burn. Since then, the phrase had become legend, a warning passed down among alien fleets, a superstition that few dared to speak aloud. And now that line had returned. The same words, from another human voice, transmitted across open space for everyone to hear. On the capital world of the Terran Confederacy, Admiral Vora stood before the holographic display showing the human transmission. His scaled fingers trembled as he watched it replay again and again. Behind him, his young officers argued, some mocking the humans, others suggesting immediate attack. Vora didn't speak. He had seen the silence of Draken with his own eyes. He had been a cadet then, stationed on the edge of the frontier when the human fleet vanished into the black. The next thing they saw were stars dimming one by one, as if someone had pulled curtains across the sky. He turned to his crew and whispered, "Evacuate the colonies." They stared at him in shock. "Sir?" They're just words. Vora looked at them, his eyes wide with fear. "You don't understand," he said. "When a human gets angry, you fight them. But when they say they're annoyed, you run." Far across the galaxy, in the shining heart of the Galactic Council, chaos reigned. Ambassadors shouted over each other, demanding explanations, reports, reassurance. The human delegate's seat was empty, its flag removed after Earth had been sanctioned months ago. A trembling aide rushed into the chamber with new data. "The human fleets have stopped moving," he said breathlessly. "All of them." The council leader, a crystalline being from the Lither species, frowned. "Stopped? You mean they're retreating?" The aide shook his head. "No, sir. They're just waiting." The word sent chills even through those who didn't believe in legends. Waiting meant planning, and humans didn't wait unless something worse was coming. A young commander suggested striking first, destroying their defenses before they could act. But the elder races refused. The Kren delegation, whose ancestors had once tried to invade Earth's moon and never returned, stood up and said, "If you value your species, you will stay very, very quiet." Meanwhile, on the dark side of the moon, hidden beneath layers of metal and silence, the human fleet sat idle. The ships were old but terrifying in design, black as obsidian, built for intimidation rather than beauty. The flagship Vigilant floated at the center, surrounded by smaller escort destroyers that emitted no light, no signal, only the faint hum of reactors warming up. Inside, Admiral Kepler sat in his command chair, staring at a single line of text on his screen. Authorization Omega, complete silence. Around him, the crew moved like shadows, calm, disciplined, no shouting, no chaos. They all knew what was about to begin. Across the command deck, a young ensign asked quietly, "Sir, should we warn them again?" Kepler didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped the armrest slowly, once, twice, 3 times. Then he smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried no warmth. "We already did," he said. "They just didn't listen." He looked up at the main display where the alien fleets still hovered near Earth's orbit. "It's funny," he said softly, "how they never learn." Deep beneath the oceans of Earth, massive gates opened, releasing old war machines that hadn't seen daylight in a century. The Leviathans, enormous subspace cruisers, began to rise through the water like awakening beasts, their black hulls shedding rust and coral. Above them, the sky filled with vapor as the atmosphere shuddered under the power surge of thousands of engines. Across every human colony, from Mars to Europa to the hidden outposts beyond Neptune, silent alerts went out. Simple codes, no words, no speeches. Those who received them knew exactly what to do. Old captains came out of retirement, engineers reopened factories once sealed by treaties, and soldiers who had grown gray stood ready again, their eyes reflecting the same fire that had built humanity's first fleet. In the alien sectors, fear became command. Empires that had once boasted of their strength now scrambled to reinforce their borders. Civilian traffic clogged jump lanes as entire populations fled toward the galactic core. Rumors spread of human ships appearing near fringe worlds, not attacking, not speaking, just watching. In one report from the Harshin Empire, a scout ship had picked up an anomaly, a massive shadow drifting between stars. They tried to scan it, but the signal bounced back distorted, carrying only one line of human code. Observation mode, complete. The crew panicked and fired first. No one heard from them again. Their entire system went offline 2 hours later. Back on Earth, in the dark war room beneath Geneva, a council of admirals stood in a circle around a glowing table. None of them spoke at first. The oldest among them, a woman with silver hair and cold eyes, finally broke the silence. "They think they can surround us again," she said. "They think we've forgotten what patience costs." Another admiral frowned. "Do we strike first?" The woman shook her head slowly. "No. We wait. Let them remember on their own." She looked up at the hologram of the human admiral's message being replayed across alien channels. 5 words, she murmured. That's all it took to shake an empire. At that same moment, millions of light years away, the Galactic Council broadcasted emergency protocols, urging all fleets to maintain defensive posture and avoid human space. But fear had already become infection. Crews mutinied rather than approach the sole border. Some ships self-destructed rather than risk being noticed. The galaxy's most powerful species, the ones who had mocked humans for their emotions, their short lives, their chaos, now trembled over a single sentence spoken in a calm voice. And yet, Earth remained quiet. No more messages, no threats, no answers. Just waiting. By the 3rd day, transmissions began vanishing one by one. Stations near human space stopped responding. Border probes went offline, sensors returned static. Some said it was interference. Others whispered that it was something else, that humans were already moving, just too fast and too quiet to detect. In the cold heart of the Andoran Empire, Emperor Voka stood on his palace balcony, staring at the stars. His aides begged him to authorize a full retreat. "It's a bluff," he said at first. But when his screens flickered and displayed the same faint transmission, the human admiral's tired voice repeating, "Now, I'm actually getting annoyed," he dropped his drink and whispered, "We need to leave." Everywhere, Old stories returned like ghosts. The children of the core race were told bedtime warnings never to mock human patience. The elders of the Vexor spoke of the black ships of Sol that once erased 3 fleets in silence. And now, even the machines, the synthetic minds of the Zyran collective, hesitated, remembering how the first AI war had ended when humans simply unplugged their networks without firing a shot. Every species had a reason to fear. And yet, at the center of it all, Earth was calm. The cities continued their routines. Civilians carried on their lives unaware of the storm building around them. Above the planet, however, the skies rippled faintly as the orbital defense grid activated for the first time in centuries. Thousands of satellites realigned, their lenses focusing outward, marking every alien ship by name, distance, and threat level. Humanity wasn't angry, they were calculating. In orbit, inside the command center of the Vigilant, Admiral Kepler stood alone before the observation window. Beyond it lay the alien blockade, millions of ships from a dozen species, spread across the dark like a second constellation. Their weapons glowed faintly blue, waiting for orders to strike. The Admiral took a slow breath and closed his eyes. "Patience," he whispered. "Always patience." Behind him, his second officer approached quietly. "Sir, orders from the Council." Kepler shook his head. "They won't call. They trust us to decide." The officer hesitated. "And what will we decide, sir?" Kepler opened his eyes again, his reflection overlapping the distant fleets. "We decide when to end waiting." He looked down at the small console beside him. On it blinked a single word: annoyed. He smiled faintly, almost sad. "You'd think they'd learn," he murmured, then turned toward his crew. "Prepare the shadow drives." In that moment, across every human outpost, silent machines began to hum. Hidden beacons lit up in forgotten systems, synchronizing their signals. Far beyond Pluto, something massive stirred beneath the icy crust. A ship larger than any built since the old wars, a relic from the Titan project known only by its code name, Oblivion Dawn. As the ice cracked and fell away, the ship's dark hull reflected no light, absorbing it instead, like a piece of the void itself. Inside, ancient reactors came alive with a deep, thunderous pulse. Back in alien space, sensors exploded with warnings. Massive gravitational spikes appeared where there should have been none, whole sectors flickering like dying stars. Panic gripped the fleets again. Admirals shouted over one another, trying to identify the signatures, but none matched any known vessel. Then, just before the readings cut out completely, one technician screamed as the scanners showed movement. Hundreds of shapes rising from the dark, forming a formation only one species ever used, the inverted spearhead of Earth Command. In that instant, every empire understood why their ancestors had warned them, why the oldest stories always ended with the same line whispered in fear. Humans never shouted before they struck. They gave one warning, one last chance, and when they said they were annoyed, it wasn't anger, it was judgment. The galaxy never truly slept, but after the human transmission, it forgot how to breathe. In every sector, in every empire, the same words echoed through command centers and across military halls. "Now, I'm actually getting annoyed." No one dared to repeat them aloud. They were written in silence, typed in fear, whispered behind closed doors like a curse. The younger races didn't understand, laughing nervously, saying humans were bluffing, that no species could threaten the entire galaxy alone. But the older races, the ones who had seen the early wars, began to move their fleets back quietly. They didn't issue orders, they just left. Some erased their records of ever having been near Sol, deleting files, shutting down communications. It was as if the entire galaxy was trying to hide from the consequences of its own arrogance. But the humans weren't chasing anyone yet. They were waiting. In the deep cold of space, far beyond Neptune, the first signs of movement began. Old stations long thought abandoned came online one by one, their sensors flickering to life. The outposts had no names, only designations: black docks, shadow yards, and the vaults of Orion. Inside them, enormous machines began to hum, their cores glowing faint red. Drones emerged from hangars, scanning ancient weapon racks sealed for generations. Rusted ships began to stir as automated systems repaired them with precision. Across Mars, the factories once used for terraforming shifted their power grids to old coordinates. Civilian workers stood in confusion as the ground beneath them rumbled, giant silos opening like wounds in the red dust. The symbols on them were faint but unmistakable. UNSC Defender Command. The humans were waking something that hadn't moved in 100 years. Meanwhile, on the edge of the Orion Belt, the Vexary Dominion gathered its fleets, their admiral shouting orders to prepare for a preventive strike. He thought he was being clever, acting before humanity did. But his tactical officer, an old soldier with half his face scarred from a war long forgotten, refused to follow. "You fool," he hissed. "You don't attack the sleeping wolf. You watch where it goes." The admiral laughed, calling the old man paranoid, but when their fleet jumped toward Sol, they found nothing. Empty space. No human ships, no satellites, no transmissions. Just silence. Then, as their sensors recalibrated, they saw it, a wall of dark energy stretching across their path. They tried to analyze it, but the readings didn't make sense. It wasn't a shield or a weapon. It was movement. Something vast, invisible, and quiet sliding through the void. A moment later, every ship's power failed. The last thing the admiral saw before his ship went dark was a shadow the size of a moon gliding past them, followed by a faint human voice over the comm, "You shouldn't have come here." And then they were gone. Back on Earth, deep under the crust, command centers glowed with quiet life. The halls of the global defense grid had been silent for decades, locked behind layers of government secrecy. Now, they pulsed with activity. Generals who had grown old in peacetime walked through those halls again, their uniforms dusty but their eyes sharp. The main command room was filled with holographic maps of alien territories, every border, every fleet movement displayed like a beating heart. At the center of it all stood Admiral Kepler, the same man who had spoken the words that froze the galaxy. He stood in silence, his gaze fixed on the Sol defense line. Around him, officers whispered updates. "Shadow drives are ready. Leviathans are rising from ocean storage. The Black Ship fleet has been rearmed." But Kepler said nothing. He only pressed his hand to the hologram of Earth and whispered, "They forgot what patience costs." The alien empires, desperate and confused, began calling emergency meetings of the Galactic Council. The Grand Chamber on Selen Prime buzzed with panic. Ambassadors shouted over one another, demanding a response. "We must strike first," roared the Zerin representative. "They are rebuilding. If we don't crush them now, we never will." But the elder of the Kren species, whose eyes were like pools of silver mercury, raised a trembling hand. "You fool," she said. "You can't crush what doesn't want to rule you. You can only anger it. And they've already said it, haven't they? They're annoyed." Her voice broke on the last word. "When humans get annoyed, stars die." The chamber fell silent. Even the most arrogant among them felt a chill creep up their spines. Reports kept coming, each one worse than the last. Entire sectors were going dark, not from attack, but from retreat. Fleets abandoning their posts, colonies shutting down communications, trade routes collapsing. It wasn't war yet. It was fear turning into chaos. The galaxy was tearing itself apart before a single human fired a shot. Across the council worlds, propaganda screens tried to calm the public. "Do not fear Earth," the broadcast said. "They are outnumbered, outgunned, outdated." But no one believed it. Traders began hoarding supplies. Citizens left cities. Old veterans gathered in bars, speaking in low voices about the last time they saw a human fleet in motion. "They don't move like us," one of them said, his eyes distant. "They move like they already know how it ends." In the deep void beyond Jupiter, the first Leviathan-class warship broke through the clouds. The TSS Dominion, silent for almost a century, drifted upward from the storms like a black mountain rising from the sea. Lightning danced across its armor, revealing human symbols carved deep into its hull. The ship was old but terrifying, no color, no light, No nameplate, only a single phrase etched along its side, "Do not test patience." Inside, thousands of crew members woke from cryosleep. The captain, a woman with steel-gray eyes, stepped onto the bridge, her voice steady but heavy with memory. "Systems?" she asked. "Online," her crew answered. She looked out at the stars, her reflection faint in the glass. "Then let's remind them why they stopped saying our name out loud." In alien space, the panic spread faster than light. The Clyar Empire evacuated its border worlds entirely, sending billions of refugees toward the core. The Hellion Dominion burned their own shipyards to prevent humans from taking them. Every empire thought the others were plotting in secret, none realizing that humanity hadn't even moved yet. They were watching, observing, waiting. The silence became unbearable. The longer it lasted, the worse it felt, like a pressure building in the lungs of the galaxy. Ships vanished without fights, stations went cold, and still, no one saw a single human fleet in open combat. It was as if they were being erased by shadows. Inside one council chamber, a young historian tried to warn them. He had spent his life studying human wars, the few records that hadn't been destroyed or classified. "They don't fight for land," he said, standing before the alien leaders. "They fight for memory. When a human says they're annoyed, it means they're done asking for peace. It means you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." One ambassador laughed bitterly. "They are one world against millions." The historian met his gaze. So were they last time. And across the stars, proof of those words began to appear. Small, forgotten human colonies suddenly came alive. Stations that had been declared abandoned decades ago started broadcasting encrypted codes. Every signal pointed toward one direction, the edge of the galaxy known as the Black Curtain. It was a dead zone, a place no one dared enter, where hundreds of exploration fleets had vanished. The Council had banned entry long ago, calling it a cursed region. But now the sensors detected something massive moving inside it. Energy readings beyond comprehension. And when one alien scout ship tried to investigate, the transmission it sent back contained only a few words before cutting off: "The stars are turning off." On Earth, the population had no idea how close they were to war. Life went on, but the sky above them changed. Military satellites glowed red at night. Transport ships vanished into orbit and never returned. News anchors spoke carefully, their eyes betraying what they couldn't say aloud. And deep below, in the core of the old United Nations bunker, the last Human Council met in person for the first time in over 50 years. They sat in silence until one of them finally asked, "Do we deploy the Obsidian Protocol?" Admiral Kepler nodded slowly. "If they cross the Mars line, yes." A general frowned. "That'll erase half their fleets." Kepler's eyes darkened. "Then let it be half." Meanwhile, alien fleets kept sending messages, pleading for dialogue. They promised reparations, peace, even tribute. Humanity didn't answer. The silence itself became the message. Ships began to disappear in zones where human signals were last detected. No explosions, no debris, just vanished from sensors like dust into light. The aliens called it the quiet. By the fourth week, entire sectors went silent. Even the Galactic news network stopped reporting, afraid of drawing human attention. The galaxy had become a ghost of its former self. And in that growing void, somewhere between the stars of Orion, the human fleet assembled. Thousands of ships, large and small, lined up in perfect silence. No signals, no chatter, no hesitation. The stars reflected off their black hulls, making them almost invisible. At the center, Admiral Kepler stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, staring into the dark. His second officer approached. "Sir, the fleet is ready." Kepler nodded. "Good. Then we wait a little longer." The officer hesitated. "The galaxy already fears us, sir. Why not strike now?" Kepler's gaze didn't move. "Fear isn't enough," he said. "They need to remember." Behind him, the screens flickered as messages from colonies poured in, one from Mars, one from Luna, one from the icy mining stations on Europa. Each message contained a single word: ready. He stood straighter, his voice calm but heavy. Open channel, he said. The comm officer nodded. Channel open. Kepler looked into the dark and spoke quietly, knowing billions would hear him soon. To those watching, he said, we asked for peace. We begged for silence. But you kept pushing. You called us fragile, emotional, unstable. You mistook kindness for weakness. So listen closely. The next time you hear those 5 words, remember, there won't be a next time. He paused, eyes hard as steel. Because the storm has already begun. And somewhere far beyond the rim of known space, a single human ship appeared in the middle of the alien frontier. It didn't attack. It didn't speak. It simply transmitted the same message on every frequency across the galaxy. Observation complete. Phase 1 initiated. That night, the stars seemed to flicker one by one as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The calm had ended. The storm was coming. The galaxy had grown used to the silence, the kind that burned in the background like static in the mind. But then the silence ended, and everything changed. It began without warning, a flicker across deep space relays, a pulse of energy that rippled through 1,000 star systems. At first, the alien sensors thought it was interference, some cosmic event in the void, but when they traced the signal, every reading pointed to the same impossible origin: Earth. A planet that had been quiet for weeks, surrounded and supposedly cornered, now spoke again. But it wasn't a transmission in any known format. It came as a wave, pure data, coded in ancient Terran encryption that most modern machines couldn't even decode. Fleets all over the galaxy stopped moving, waiting for translation. And when the meaning finally came through, billions froze in disbelief. The message was only 3 words long. You had warnings. Command centers erupted into chaos. The Council demanded an explanation, but every attempt to contact Earth failed. Their signals bounced back distorted, filled with strange echoes and static like voices whispering behind the noise. Then something even more disturbing happened. Human signatures began appearing all over the galaxy. They weren't near Earth, not even close. They were deep in alien space, in regions that should have been impossible to reach without detection. Small, faint energy readings first, then larger ones. They multiplied by the hour. Every sensor array that tried to track them returned the same data. Human fleet ID codes, hundreds of them, transmitting in perfect synchronization. It didn't make sense. The aliens had believed Earth's fleets were contained inside Sol, surrounded by their combined armadas. But now it became horrifyingly clear, they had never surrounded anything. The humans weren't trapped. They were scattered everywhere, hidden in the dark. In the capital of the Vexor Dominion, the Emperor watched the readings on his holographic table with shaking hands. How is this possible? He demanded. His intelligence officer's voice cracked as she replied, Sir, we're detecting Terran hull signatures in 9 different sectors. They're already inside our borders. The Emperor stood in disbelief. That's impossible. We scanned every jump lane. But the officer shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. They didn't use jump lanes, sir. They were already here. The words hit like a bullet through the room. Everyone went silent. The humans had been preparing for years, maybe decades, hiding ships, infiltrating space, building fleets in the shadows while the galaxy laughed at their weakness. Across alien space, panic became strategy. Commanders screamed orders to hunt the hidden fleets, but by the time their ships reached the coordinates, all they found were empty voids and cold wreckage of their own scout ships. The human fleets weren't just attacking, they were playing with them. In the Zorani systems, entire communications grids went dark within minutes. Satellites were hijacked and turned against their owners. On the border of the Zeran Confederacy, an entire sector vanished from the map, every ship, every station, gone without a trace. Then the human message appeared again, this time across every known frequency, spoken in a calm, almost gentle voice. Do not fear. We are simply correcting the map. The words froze the blood of everyone who heard them. Correcting the map? The aliens didn't understand, until hours later, when the first star systems stopped responding. The entire Zurani Eastern Rim, 7 planets, 12 stations, had gone offline. When the Council demanded answers, all that returned were distorted visuals of ships moving through the void faster than anything ever recorded, leaving trails of light like ghosts slicing through the dark. Those who had fought humans before recognized the maneuver instantly. "That's their hunter fleet," one old admiral whispered. "They are sweeping." The younger ones didn't understand. Sweeping what? The old man looked at them with hollow eyes. Everything. Meanwhile, on Earth, the night sky glowed with artificial auroras as the orbital grid came alive. The defense platforms shifted into formation, revealing weapons so old they had become myths even to humanity's own people. Civilians looked up at the strange lights, not knowing that above them, the most powerful war network ever built was fully awake for the first time in centuries. Deep beneath the planet's crust, the command core pulsed with energy. Inside, Admiral Kepler stood before a massive hologram showing the galaxy map. Countless red dots blinked across it, marking every human fleet in motion. His second officer approached cautiously. "Sir, all shadow fleets are reporting in. Operation Recall is complete." Kepler nodded, his expression calm. "Good. It's time the galaxy remembered who we are." He opened a secure transmission line, not to the Council, not to the enemy, but to every human commander across the stars. "This is Earth Command," he said quietly, his voice steady but cold. "For generations, we warned them. We signed their treaties, we followed their rules, we showed restraint while they spat on our borders and burned our colonies. They thought silence meant weakness. They were wrong. It meant we were counting." His hand hovered over the control that would broadcast the signal across the human network. "Activate the beacon." From the dark edges of the galaxy, from forgotten stations hidden behind black holes and dead worlds, came the answer. One by one, human fleets powered up their cores, their engines igniting like small suns. The darkness of space filled with light. A trader convoy in the Hellion Rim was the first to witness it. The captain, a neutral alien merchant, stared out of his cockpit as thousands of unknown signatures appeared out of nowhere. "What are they?" his navigator whispered. The captain swallowed hard. "Humans," he said. "And they're everywhere." Moments later, his ship's comm picked up a faint human transmission repeating over and over again, "Phase 2, stand by." Then, before he could blink, the human ships vanished, jumping without visible warp trails, something no technology should have been able to do. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, panic erupted into chaos. The room filled with noise, ambassadors shouting, their voices overlapping in fear. "They're activating ancient weapons. How can they move that fast? We must unite our fleets." The council leader, the Lytherian speaker, slammed his crystalline hands against the table. "Silence," he shouted. The noise died down instantly. His body glowed faintly as his voice shook. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we wish to negotiate peace." But before his aides could even act, every screen in the chamber flickered and changed. The humans were broadcasting again, and this time, the message wasn't to one world, it was to the entire galaxy. A figure appeared on every display, a woman in a black uniform with the insignia of Earth Command on her shoulder. Her face was calm, her tone almost kind. "To the Council and its member species," she said, "we have heard your requests for peace. Peace is a human word. It requires two sides willing to honor it. You failed that test long ago." Behind her, the dark outline of Earth filled the screen, its orbit surrounded by the faint shapes of warships. "You asked why your fleets vanish," she continued. "Why your colonies go silent. You asked what happens when humans stop being patient. This is your answer. You taught us how to fight your way. Now, we're teaching you why you should never have." Her eyes shifted slightly, looking straight into the camera. "This is not war. This is discipline." The feed cut, but its echo remained across every network, playing again and again until the galaxy could no longer deny what was happening. In 1 hour, 32 fleets reported critical failure. Communications collapsed in half the outer colonies. The Council sent probe drones toward Sol, desperate for intelligence, but none made it back. The only data retrieved came from a half-broken transmission near Mars. The image was brief, an enormous shadow moving through space, its size so vast it blotted out the stars. And then, the sound of a human voice saying calmly, "Stand down." The probe shut down immediately afterward. Analysts debated what the image meant, but the veterans already knew. Humanity had deployed the Leviathans. In the following days, the galaxy descended into confusion. Some species surrendered preemptively, sending messages begging for mercy, but the humans never answered. Others tried to ally with them, offering resources, but the offers went ignored. No one knew what the humans wanted. They weren't claiming territory, they weren't occupying worlds, they were simply removing threats, erasing power. Systems that had been ruled by the same empires for centuries became empty, silent, and dark. Refugees fled toward the galactic center, believing the humans wouldn't follow, but they were wrong. Wherever an empire's flag had once flown, the sky turned black, as if the stars themselves dimmed in shame. In a secret military bunker on Clyar Prime, the High Marshal stared at the map of vanishing systems and asked the question on everyone's mind. What do they want? His advisor looked up slowly. They don't want anything, sir. They're making a point. The Marshal frowned. What point? The advisor's voice was barely a whisper. That when they say they're annoyed, the universe should listen. Back on Earth, Admiral Kepler stood before the viewing glass of the Vigilant, watching the data feed of hundreds of red dots blinking out one by one. His officers waited for orders, but he said nothing for a long time. Finally, he turned toward them, his voice quiet, almost regretful. They still don't understand. This isn't revenge. It's the last warning. He looked up at the holographic display showing the galaxy slowly turning dark, sector by sector. Send the next signal, he said. The comm officer hesitated. To who, sir? Kepler's eyes hardened. To everyone. Let them know patience is gone. Moments later, every communications device in the known universe flickered to life. Civilian terminals, military screens, even ancient satellites dormant for centuries, all activated at once. Across thousands of worlds, the same image appeared. Earth seen from space, calm, blue, and silent. Then the words appeared beneath it, glowing white against the dark. Now, we are truly getting annoyed. And just like that, the transmission ended. No threats, no demands, just a promise that the galaxy could feel in its bones. For a moment, no one spoke anywhere. Every species, every leader, every soldier sat in silence, staring at the dark screens, realizing what they had unleashed. And in the cold void beyond Sol, the human fleets began to move again, not loud, not bright, but slow and deliberate, like the first tremor before a storm that would change the stars themselves. The galaxy never forgot the silence that came before the first strike, because silence was all that warned them. No blaring alarms, no invasion broadcasts, just the stillness of a universe that had already decided who would live and who would not. The aliens had gathered their fleets, believing they were ready, surrounding the Sol system with millions of ships, their engines glowing like a second sunrise across the void. But in the command deck of every alien vessel, something strange began to happen. The navigation panels flickered, the radar showed phantom readings, the stars themselves seemed to shift position. Officers shouted orders, but their voices trembled. Their scanners weren't wrong, the constellations were moving. Whole sectors of the sky dimmed, and then from that darkness came the shapes, vast and endless, like mountains drifting through the void. The human fleets had arrived. No one saw them come. No warp signatures, no signals, just sudden, quiet presence. The first to appear was the Leviathan Oblivion Dawn, its hull black as deep water, no lights, no markings, only the faint shimmer of its shield reflecting starlight. Behind it came hundreds more, massive carriers, smaller destroyers, drones, ships thought to be myths from the first interstellar wars. The alien admirals watched in disbelief as their comms died one by one. No matter how much power they rerouted, every frequency jammed. The human fleet didn't speak. They didn't have to. Their silence was louder than any threat. On board the Vigilant, Admiral Kepler stood at the observation window, watching the enemy fleets align into defensive formation. His expression was calm, emotionless. "They're ready to fight," his second officer said. Kepler's voice was quiet, almost sad. "No, they're ready to die." He raised his hand slightly. "Begin." Across the void, a single flash lit the dark, followed by another and another. The aliens didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. It wasn't laser fire or plasma. It was gravity itself turning against them. Invisible weapons that bent space around enemy ships, crushing them like glass. Entire squadrons imploded silently, their wreckage scattering like dust before vanishing into microsingularities. Then came the drones, thousands of them, smaller than any fighter but faster than light. They darted through enemy formations, slicing through hulls with beams so precise they left no fire, only cold cuts. Within minutes, entire armadas disintegrated. The alien commanders screamed into dead comms, begging for reinforcements, but every fleet that came closer vanished before reaching the line. Humanity wasn't fighting a war. They were performing an execution. In the Zorani sector, Admiral Vora watched helplessly as his ships fell one after another. The sensors couldn't track the human weapons. Every time he ordered his gunners to fire, their targets were already gone. His communications officer turned to him, pale. "They're inside our formation, sir." Vora's voice shook. "How? We have shields." The officer whispered, "They're not firing at the shields, sir. They're firing at the spaces between." Vora froze. "Between what?" "Between atoms." A second later, his ship split in half without an explosion, just quiet, perfect destruction. On the other side of the galaxy, the Terran Confederacy tried to mount a counterattack. Thousands of ships jumped into a single sector near the Helios Gate, waiting for human contact. Hours passed. Nothing came. Then the stars began to fade. One by one, they blinked out, not from distance but from something blocking them, something vast moving behind the light. The fleet turned their scanners upward, and their blood ran cold. Above them, hanging like a god in the void, was a human vessel so large it didn't fit their maps. The sensors labeled it as a planetary carrier, but that wasn't possible. Its size defied scale, its shadow stretching across moons. A voice broke through their comms, calm and mechanical. "Fleet Zeranalios confirmed. Judgment approved." And then, without warning, the carrier's belly opened, releasing a wave of light that wasn't light at all. It was sound converted into energy, a frequency designed to shatter molecular bonds. In 3 seconds, the entire fleet ceased to exist. Everywhere across the galaxy, the same story repeated. Planets lit up as invisible strikes tore through their defenses. Cities erased without fire, only silence. The humans didn't broadcast demands, didn't issue ultimatums. They didn't want surrender. They wanted memory. The galaxy had to remember what happened the last time someone tested Earth's patience. On the council world of Selen Prime, the council leader watched the reports flood in. "Entire sectors gone," his aide whispered. "Whole empires gone." The leader stared at the data, his crystalline body dimming. "They're not destroying us," he said softly. "They're erasing us." He turned to his advisors. "Find their motive. There must be one." But there wasn't. Humanity had no motive left except balance. Back on Earth, the skies were quiet. Civilians could see faint streaks in the night, trails of light from fleets jumping through distant space. The news said nothing. The government said nothing. But people knew. They knew their kind had been insulted for too long, pushed too far, and now something deep within humanity had awakened. In the command core, Admiral Kepler stood before the war map. The holographic galaxy glowed red, thousands of dots marking destroyed systems. His officers waited for the next order. He looked at them one by one, his expression unreadable. "Are we monsters yet?" he asked quietly. No one answered. He turned back to the map. "Send the second wave." The second wave wasn't made of ships. It was information. Viruses carried through light, data storms that infected alien infrastructure. Power grids turned against their own planets. Shields failed mid-battle. Artificial intelligences went mad, recognizing human code embedded in their programming. It turned out humanity hadn't just been building weapons. They had been studying the galaxy, infiltrating it piece by piece for decades. Every empire's weakness was known, every blind spot mapped. The humans didn't just strike hard, they struck perfectly. In the Vexor capital, Emperor Talek stood in the war room, surrounded by panicking advisors. "We have to talk to them," one shouted. "Beg them to stop." Talek slammed his claws on the table. "Who do we talk to? They won't answer." Just then, the lights flickered, and the screens filled with static. A faint human voice came through, distorted but clear enough to chill everyone in the room. "Phase complete. Compliance achieved." Then silence. The Emperor fell to his knees, staring at the black screen. His entire empire, one of the galaxy's strongest, was gone. Across the galaxy, the few surviving fleets began fleeing, abandoning colonies, leaving civilians behind. The galaxy that once mocked Earth now prayed for mercy from a species that showed none. Yet, the humans didn't pursue them. They simply stopped. Their fleets vanished into the dark, one by one, leaving behind nothing but the ruins of pride and the memory of silence. In the Council archives, one historian wrote the last recorded log before communication collapsed. "They never wanted power," he said. "They wanted quiet. And when they spoke, the stars themselves listened." In orbit around Mars, the Vigilant drifted in silence. Inside, Admiral Kepler sat alone, watching the fading glow of the last battle. His second officer entered quietly. "Sir, all targets neutralized. The Council fleets are gone." Kepler nodded slowly. "Good. Then we're done." The officer hesitated. "What if they return, sir?" Kepler's eyes were distant, his voice low. "They won't. They finally learned the rule." He stood and looked out at the stars. "When we say we're annoyed, the galaxy stops existing for a while." Outside, the human fleets began to fade from scanners, disappearing into hyperspace corridors that no one else could track. The galaxy lay silent again, not with peace, but with fear. The few surviving aliens hid in distant worlds, whispering about what they had seen, what they had heard. The quiet humans who ended empires without shouting, without rage, only precision. And in that silence, a new legend was born, one that every race would pass down to their children in trembling voices. Never mistake human calm for mercy. And as the last human warship vanished into the endless dark, the stars above flickered faintly, reflecting the words that would forever echo through history. "Now, I'm actually getting annoyed." They said Draken 9 was cursed, a dead world wrapped in a black mist that never lifted, but the truth was worse than any curse. The mist wasn't natural. It was the dust of burned stone and melted metal, the last breath of 10 empires that had once called themselves immortal. Generations later, the galaxy still refused to travel near it, their maps marking it only with 2 words, Forbidden Zone. But now, as the human fleets vanished once again into the dark, whispers of Draken 9 began to return. On the shattered capital world of the Lytherians, an old alien historian named Krell sat alone in a ruined library, the firelight flickering against the silver scales of his hands. He had lived long enough to see the first human wars and long enough to regret surviving them. When the frightened council guards came to him asking what was happening, he didn't look up from his old screen. "You want to know why they're afraid?" he asked quietly. "You want to know what those words mean?" The guards nodded, their faces pale. Krell sighed, his voice trembling like rusted metal. "Then listen carefully. I was there when the first man said them. Centuries ago, before the council, before the treaties, the humans had been newcomers among the stars. They were wild, unpredictable, fragile, and the galaxy loved to remind them of it. 10 great empires joined forces to contain them, to break the small colonies spreading beyond Sol. Draken 9 was one of those colonies, a quiet mining world where a few thousand humans lived under the red glow of twin suns. It was peaceful, harmless, until the coalition came. 10 empires, 10 fleets, all descending on a single world as a demonstration of power. They wanted to make an example, to teach humanity submission. Krell was a young officer then, serving aboard a Lytherian dreadnought, watching from orbit as the bombardment began. The humans had no defense grid, no fleet, nothing but ground troops with rifles and courage that made no sense. The Empires thought it would be quick. It wasn't. For a full year, the humans fought back from the ashes, refusing to surrender even as their world turned to glass. Every week, the coalition demanded their surrender, and every week the humans replied with the same signal, not yet. It became a joke among the fleets. Commanders mocked them. Soldiers bet on when they would finally beg for mercy. Then one day, without warning, the human signal changed. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a plea. It was a calm male voice saying, "Now, I'm actually getting annoyed." At first, everyone laughed. It sounded ridiculous. But then the laughter stopped. Krell still remembered the moment the stars dimmed. It began with the outer sensor arrays, thousands of them failing at once. The communications filled with static, the power grids flickered. When they looked toward the human base, it was gone, not destroyed, just missing, as if the ground had swallowed it. The next moment, every ship in orbit detected hundreds of heat signatures rising from below. They thought it was debris. It wasn't. The human fleet that appeared above Draken 9 didn't exist on any record. No one had seen them build it. No one knew where it came from. The ships were black, silent, angular, their engines glowing a dull red. They didn't answer hails, they didn't demand surrender. They simply started moving. The first salvo wasn't even visible. One instant, 10 alien carriers stood in formation. The next, there were 9, then 6, then none. Krell remembered staring at his screen, watching the icons vanish faster than he could blink. "What weapon is that?" his commander screamed. The answer came seconds later when the ship began to shake. The air grew heavy, the lights dimmed, and a strange hum filled the hull. It wasn't an explosion. It was pressure, space itself bending, folding inward. "They're collapsing gravity wells," someone yelled. Krell barely escaped in a shuttle as the dreadnought folded into itself like paper crushed by an invisible hand. When he looked back, the planet below was gone. Gone, not destroyed, not shattered, just erased. In its place was a black void that swallowed light. For weeks, the surviving fleets tried to understand what happened, but the humans offered no explanation. Their ships left silently, their transmission brief and final. Draken 9 concluded. Every empire that had joined the attack vanished within months. No survivors, no debris, no signals. The Council eventually declared it classified, banned the subject entirely, called it a cosmic event. But Krell knew. He had seen the human eyes in the shuttle that rescued him later. Eyes that held no rage, no satisfaction, only disappointment. "You shouldn't have done that," one of them told him. "You woke something that wanted to sleep." Krell's voice shook as he finished the story. "Do you understand now?" he asked the guards. "Every generation, someone forgets. Every few centuries, they push the humans again. They think the old stories are lies. And then the words come back." He looked up at them, tears glistening in his eyes. "When they say they're annoyed, it means they're tired of being civilized." The guards said nothing. Outside, thunder rolled across the broken city, and in the distance, the night sky flickered with faint flashes, the same pattern seen before Draken 9 vanished. Krell stared out the window, whispering to himself, "It's happening again." Across the galaxy, others remembered too. The Kren elders opened their sealed archives and trembled as they read the old human warnings, the same language appearing once more in intercepted transmissions. The Zorani priests began to pray to their gods, even though they had once called the humans godless. And in the hollow moons of the Vexor Dominion, old veterans gathered in silence, polishing the medals they had earned fighting humans long ago, each of them knowing those medals were curses now. Every record of the Draken 9 event began to reappear across data networks, not by accident but as if someone, something, wanted the galaxy to remember. The footage was grainy, distorted, but unmistakable. The moment the stars over Draken 9 went dark, replaced by a single flash of light in the shape of a human hand closing into a fist. Back on Earth, deep beneath the oceans, the same symbol appeared again, glowing faintly on the side of the Oblivion Dawn. Inside the ship's command core, Admiral Kepler watched it pulse like a heartbeat. His officers exchanged uneasy glances. "Sir," one said softly, "the fleet archives are reactivating the Draken 9 files." Kepler didn't look away from the screen. "Good," he said quietly. "Let them see what happens when patience ends." The officer hesitated. "Sir, should we warn the colonies?" Kepler finally turned, his eyes like steel. "There's no need. The galaxy already remembers. They just don't know it yet." In the Galactic Council chamber, the alien leaders argued endlessly, each one blaming the others for provoking humanity. The Lytherian speaker slammed his crystalline fists on the table. "This is madness. They can't destroy us all." An old Vexor general rose slowly, his voice hollow. "They don't have to. They just have to make us disappear." The room went quiet. Somewhere in the distance, thunder cracked across the sky of Selen Prime, though no storm had been forecast. The Council demanded proof of this so-called Draken 9 story, and for a moment, everyone turned to Krell, the old historian brought in as a witness. He stood in the center of the room, frail, trembling, his eyes reflecting a kind of sorrow that had no end. "Proof," he whispered. "You want proof?" He raised his hand and pointed upward. "Look outside your windows tonight. If you see the stars flicker, start praying. Because it means they're coming again." That night, across hundreds of worlds, the stars did flicker. At first, people thought it was an atmospheric glitch. Then the power grids failed. Spaceports went offline. And above every major city, for just a second, appeared the faint outline of a human face projected through the clouds, expressionless and calm. The same calm that had come before Draken 9 fell silent. On one frontier planet, a young child asked his mother what it meant. The mother, too afraid to answer, whispered, "It means we should be quiet now." And somewhere beyond the rim, where no light reached, the human fleets prepared once more. The old code from Draken 9 flashed across their screens, alive again after centuries of silence. The phrase that had once ended 10 empires now glowed in blood-red letters, "Final patience level exceeded." The officers aboard the Vigilant stood in silence as Admiral Kepler read the message. "They finally triggered it," he murmured. His voice carried no anger, only certainty. "History repeats. Always." He turned toward the window, staring at the galaxy stretched before him, vast and unaware. "Draken 9 was the first lesson," he said softly. "Now we teach the last one." And as the human engines roared to life once more, the stars near the edge of known space began to vanish one by one, the same way they did centuries ago. The galaxy finally understood that the curse of Draken 9 was not that it had been destroyed, but that it had never truly ended. It had only been waiting for humanity to get annoyed again. The galaxy was already on its knees when Earth finally spoke again. Worlds burned in silence, fleets drifted like carcasses between dead suns, and the void itself seemed to hum with fear. For weeks, no one had heard a single human transmission, only the static echoes of ships vanishing and stars going dark. The alien empires waited for the storm to pass, believing maybe it was over, that humanity's fury had cooled. But deep down, every race that still breathed knew it wasn't over. Humans didn't leave things unfinished. They watched, they waited, and when they were ready, they made sure everyone knew it. The first sign came as a faint pulse across subspace, weak at first, then growing louder, spreading faster than light, reaching every planet, every station, every ship. At first, no one could decode it. The signal carried no words, just a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Then the pattern changed, and a voice broke through, calm, cold, unmistakably human. "This is Earth Command." Those 4 words froze every world. In an instant, the noise of the galaxy died. Traders stopped their engines. Council halls went silent. Every being, from the smallest outpost worker to the highest emperor, turned toward the nearest screen. And then the voice spoke again. You've forgotten what patience costs, the voice said quietly, as if speaking to someone standing right beside it. You've forgotten Draken 9. You've forgotten Titan, Mars, Europa, and every colony you burned because you thought we were too small to matter. You mocked our silence. You called it fear. But silence was the sound of a species counting. The transmission flickered, and a face appeared, female, human, wearing the black uniform of Earth Command. Her expression was unreadable, her voice steady. We waited, she said. We watched. We learned. And now, you've left us no choice but to remind you what happens when humanity stops waiting. The image shifted, showing the endless black of space filled with human warships. The fleets moved with impossible precision, their formations spanning systems, shadows stretching across stars. The admiral's voice continued. We are not angry. Anger is loud. Anger is blind. We are annoyed. She paused, and the silence after those words was worse than any weapon. Billions of beings across the galaxy felt their hearts stop. And when we get annoyed, she said softly, we fix the problem. On the bridge of the Vigilant, Admiral Kepler stood watching the broadcast as it echoed across the stars. Every ship in the human fleet mirrored the transmission, amplifying it until even the deepest corners of the void heard it. His officers waited for his command, their faces pale under the dim lights. They'll panic, one whispered. Kepler nodded slowly. They should. Outside the viewport, the stars began to shift as entire constellations dimmed under the shadow of human fleets moving into final formation. He tapped a small console and said, Initiate final wave. Across thousands of ships, the same order repeated, calm and precise. Engines roared silently in the vacuum, their blue light vanishing into the dark as the human armada spread out, surrounding the galaxy from the edges inward. On the council world of Selen Prime, chaos returned. The council members screamed at their screens as Earth's message played on a loop. We must respond, one shouted. Send them our surrender, another cried. But none of the transmissions went through. All channels were blocked. Then the screens flickered again, and the human admiral's face returned. This isn't about surrender, she said. It's about balance. You've taken, lied, enslaved, and destroyed. You've treated mercy as weakness. So we're taking it away. Behind her, the black silhouette of a Leviathan-class ship filled the sky. We offered peace, she continued, her voice almost sad. You answered with war. We offered silence. You filled it with arrogance. So now, we offer truth. And truth has a cost. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Watch your skies. In the Vexa sector, the first world to witness it, night fell in the middle of the day. The sun dimmed without warning, its light bending around something massive now orbiting the planet. The people looked up, terrified, as the clouds began to swirl around a shadow larger than their moon. It was a human dreadnought, hovering silently, casting a darkness that stretched across continents. For a long moment, it didn't move. It simply watched. Then, as the people stared in awe, a single beam of light cut down from its hull, not to destroy, but to write words across the sky, words visible to every living thing, you were warned. The beam faded, and the ship vanished without sound, leaving the world shaking, not from impact, but from realization. Similar scenes unfolded across the galaxy. On Zurani Prime, the oceans boiled as human probes surfaced from the deep, long hidden beneath their waters for decades. On Hellion Station, the artificial suns dimmed one by one as human code hijacked the systems. In the Clyar Empire, their grand defense grid turned inward, targeting its own cities, while a calm human voice played over every speaker, peace is earned. You spent yours. Entire civilizations crumbled without a single shot fired. Humanity didn't need war. They used precision, knowledge, and silence like scalpels cutting away the disease of pride. And through it all, Earth remained quiet again. The transmissions stopped. The fleets vanished. For a time, it seemed over. But that quiet wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness that waits for the echo of a scream. On Selen Prime, in the council chamber, the old historian Krell sat alone, his eyes reflecting the static on the darkened screens. "This is Draken 9 all over again," he whispered. "Only this time, there's no one left to warn the next generation." The stars outside flickered again, faint but steady, forming patterns he recognized. The coordinates of every world that had attacked humanity in the last century. Each one pulsed in red. He understood then what the humans had meant by balance. It wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. Back in Sol, beneath the black clouds swirling over Earth, Admiral Kepler watched as the transmission replayed one last time across the human command center. "They'll listen now," his aide said softly. Kepler shook his head. For a while. He turned toward the window, looking at the blue glow of the planet below. "Until they forget again. Then we'll have to remind them again. That's the curse of being human. We forgive too easily. And they mistake that for mercy." He reached into his pocket, pulling out an old coin engraved with the words Draken 9, "Never again," and placed it on the console. "Send final message," he said quietly. The comm officer nodded. "Message ready, sir." Kepler spoke slowly, his voice carrying across all human fleets and every corner of alien space. "To all who can hear me," he said, "this isn't conquest. This isn't rage. This is clarity. We will not be provoked again. We will not ask twice. When we say we are annoyed, it means the universe has pushed too far." He paused, then finished softly, "And when patience ends, creation resets." The signal ended, and once more, the galaxy went dark. No battles, no screams, no explosions. Just the quiet hum of empty frequencies and the echo of a species that never needed to shout to be feared. For hours, no one spoke anywhere. Then, slowly, the stars began to shine again. But they looked different now, smaller, weaker, as if even light itself had learned to move carefully around Earth. And somewhere in the endless dark, as the human fleets drifted home, Admiral Kepler closed his eyes and whispered the same words that had haunted the galaxy for centuries. The same line that every alien child would be taught to fear for generations to come. "Now. I'm actually getting annoyed." The silence that followed Earth's final message was not peace, it was punishment. A silence so complete that even the stars seemed afraid to shine too brightly. For the first time in history, no distress calls, no wars, no council meetings, no radio traffic filled the void. Entire sectors went dark, the comm channels empty except for the faint hum of space itself. Planets that once glowed with the light of 1,000 cities now drifted in shadows, their skies quiet, their people whispering in fear of speaking too loud, as if sound itself might draw human attention. The galaxy had never known quiet like this. For centuries, every race had lived in noise, politics, trade, war, but now there was nothing. And in that emptiness, everyone finally understood the truth. Humanity hadn't destroyed the galaxy. They had muted it. One by one, worlds began to realize their systems had been altered. Weapons wouldn't power on. Communications were capped to planetary range. Engines refused to jump past designated limits. It was as if an invisible hand had wrapped around every civilization and simply said, "Enough." The realization spread like ice through the blood of every leader. They weren't free anymore. They were being monitored, controlled, watched by a power that didn't need to occupy them to rule them. Earth had turned the galaxy into a quiet classroom, and the rest of creation sat in silence, afraid to move. On the council world of Selen Prime, the once mighty chamber stood in ruins, its seats empty except for a few survivors. The great Lytherian speaker sat alone, staring at the dark sky through the cracked glass dome. "We called them savages," he whispered, his voice echoing in the hollow chamber. "But they built something we can't even comprehend." The old historian Krell sat beside him, his body trembling, his voice weak. "It's not technology," he said softly. "It's understanding. They understand what we are better than we understand ourselves. We make noise. They create silence." Outside, the storm winds howled across the empty streets, carrying the sound of crumbling towers. Krell closed his eyes and added, "We should have listened when they said they were getting annoyed. We thought it was pride. It was warning." His last words faded into the wind as the power failed for the final time, and Selen Prime went dark, joining the growing list of silent worlds. Meanwhile, on the edge of the Zorani system, a lone exploration vessel picked up a strange signal. It wasn't human. It was something deeper, older. The captain hesitated before decoding it, fearing another warning, but curiosity won. The transmission unfolded into a simple image. The map of the galaxy with every known empire marked in gray, every human colony marked in white, and one glowing circle in the center labeled Observation Zone. The message beneath it was only one line long: maintain silence or face correction. The crew didn't speak for the rest of the voyage. They turned off their engines and drifted in darkness until their food ran out, too afraid to send a signal home. On Earth, there were no celebrations, no parades, no speeches, no declarations of victory. The cities were quiet, lights dimmed, as if even humanity mourned what it had done. In the command chamber deep beneath Geneva, Admiral Kepler stood alone before the galactic map. The entire display was blue now, no red threat markers, no blinking warnings, only calm. The system AI spoke softly through the speakers. All sectors silent, Admiral. The galaxy is stable. Kepler nodded slowly, his eyes tired. Stable, he repeated, the word heavy with meaning. That's what they wanted, isn't it? He looked out through the observation window where Earth floated in perfect stillness, its blue oceans reflecting the distant stars. We gave them peace. They just never realized how it would feel. His second officer approached quietly. Do we keep the lockdown, sir? Kepler turned, his expression unreadable. Until they learn how to speak without violence. The officer hesitated. And if they don't? Kepler looked back at the map. Then they stay quiet forever. Across the human fleets, the soldiers returned to their stations, silent as their ships glided back into orbit. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. Every one of them knew that what they had unleashed was not victory but judgment. The black ships of Sol drifted like shadows over a galaxy that now feared to breathe. The Vigilant came to rest above the moon, its surface reflecting faint blue light from Earth below. Kepler stood on the bridge, surrounded by silence so pure it hurt. What do we tell the next generation? His aide asked softly. Kepler took a long breath. Tell them this, he said. When we said we were annoyed, the universe listened. That's enough. He turned off the lights and walked away, leaving only the faint hum of the engines in the dark. Years passed. Slowly, some worlds tried to rebuild, to speak again, testing whispers across small frequencies. The first voice to break the silence was not human or alien, it was artificial. A forgotten AI satellite drifting near the Orion belt reactivated itself, transmitting an old log from before the war. Humans are dangerous, the voice said, distorted and old. But they don't destroy for pleasure. They destroy to teach. The transmission spread across nearby systems before vanishing again, leaving behind one haunting truth. The galaxy had been given peace, but peace had become prison. In time, the surviving races began to worship the silence itself. They built temples facing Sol, offering prayers to the invisible watchers who kept their skies dark. Children were taught never to say the words that started it all. In every language, in every dialect, one sentence was banned, one phrase erased from history. Now, I'm actually getting annoyed. The words became myth, then taboo, then legend. But legends have power, and whispers always find a way. Somewhere on a mining colony near the galactic rim, a group of young workers joked about the old stories. One of them, laughing, repeated the forbidden line aloud. The others froze. The lights flickered once, twice, and then a soft voice spoke through the intercom. Calm and familiar, we heard that. The colony was gone before sunrise. Back on Earth, Admiral Kepler sat in his final years in a small cabin overlooking the sea. He had retired in silence, no medals, no honors, no name in the history books. Only he knew what had truly been done. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could still hear the voices of the past. The cries of Draken 9, the hum of the fleets, the trembling silence of the galaxy when the last message was sent. He didn't regret it, but he didn't celebrate it either. We kept the peace, he whispered to himself, watching the horizon where the sun met the water. We just did it the only way we knew how. A soft wind blew through the open window, carrying the distant sound of waves. And somewhere far above, among the stars that no longer dared to blink too brightly, a single human satellite continued to orbit in perfect stillness, its transmitter repeating the same message in infinite loop, patience restored. Observation continues. And that was how it ended. The war without fire, the empire without conquest, the silence that ruled a galaxy that once mocked Earth. Every species learned the same lesson in the end. Humans never shouted before they struck, and when they finally spoke, it was already too late. The universe learned to fear calm voices, quiet faces, and patience that lasted too long. And as centuries passed and new civilizations rose from the ashes, one truth remained carved in the memory of the stars, that when humanity says, "Now, I'm actually getting annoyed," the next sound the universe hears is silence.